Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today. We're just going to give it a little bit more time, see if anybody else joins and get started. Thanks everyone for joining. Got a couple in the lobby that I'm going to admit here. All right, I think we can get started now. As I said, hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. We welcome you to You Win the Bid, What's Next? So that's our title for our webinar today. It looks like we have a good turnout and we're really excited to exchange information and share ideas with you today. My name is Heather Amick and I'm a senior accountant at SingerLewak. I've been working as an accountant with companies who contract with the federal government for the past 6 years. I'm currently serving as treasurer of the NCMA San Fernando Valley chapter, and I'll be your moderator today. I want to introduce who else we have with us today. Our panel is a mix of experts from the industry side, government side, and the accounting perspective. So we have a good mix today. It's my pleasure to first introduce Bill Foster, Director of Contracts at NCMA Southern California. He's a seasoned professional with over 30 years of experience with various departments of defense organizations. Mr. Foster served 26 years in the United States Air Force in various operational systems research and development and staff contracting positions. He has served in various leadership positions with NCMA since 1996 and is currently a member of the San Fernando Valley chapter in North Los Angeles. He loves sharing his knowledge of government contracting, so welcome today. Good to have you. Next is Andrea Roschke. She's a partner and CPA with SingerLewak in the Business Solutions Group, and she has many years of experience with accounting with government contractors. She's currently serving as president of the San Fernando Valley chapter of the NCMA. So welcome to Andrea as well. Our third presenter is Renee Meredith, contracts manager at Rantec Microwave Systems. They're a small business manufacturer of navigational antennas sold to prime contractors, subcontractors, primarily to the Department of Defense, MDA, and NATO. Renee is the president-elect and secretary of the San Fernando chapter of NCMA. So welcome, Renee, as well. Before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping items with everyone. I know when you log on, the webinar will ask you if you accept to be recorded. So if you don't accept that, then you won't be able to share your video or your microphone. But we will be taking any questions in the chat today. So as I said, this is going to be recorded, but we do want you to contribute, reach out if you have questions. So I'll be actively looking at the chat, so we'll get to as many questions as we can. If you're having any difficulties, any technical difficulties, use the chat also, and I'll try to help you out. I think let's see, we're also going to be handing out CPE certificates for today's meeting, but in order to get one of the CPE certificates, you'll have to be present for a minimum of 50 minutes, and then we will send those out in a follow-up email that will be going out within the next week, where we will include a recording of our webinar, the CPE credit, and also a link to register for our next webinar.
And the slides,
and at the end, we'd like to have you stay tuned. We'll have other network opportunities that we're going to discuss as well. And then Andrea, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say you're also going to send a PDF of the slides. So
yes, okay, thank you. Yeah, that will be included too. So at this time, I'm going to hand it off to Bill, so you can take it from here.
All right, thanks, Heather. But if we can go to the next chart. Well, actually, I'll tell you what, while this is going to be some of the formal presentation today, but I wanted to take just a couple of minutes. I suspect that most folks on, I don't know how many government folks we have on and how many small businesses or large businesses or medium-sized businesses, but more than likely the interest in this particular topic today is post-award contracting or post-award bid. And hopefully that is something that's germane to where you're at currently with your company, because it's an exciting milestone. Getting past the bid process, the proposal process, and actually getting a contract award is a significant achievement for your company. Represents the lead up to long-term growth and new opportunities within this government marketplace or space that we have. And you've been through the proposal process more than likely. So the good news is your proposal process was successful. The bad news is the work begins now. And so some of you might already be in that fully up to your eyeballs in all of the government requirements that you just may not have fully understood on the proposal side of the equation. But I just wanted to kind of give a couple of recommendations here. When you get this contract award, and we're going to be talking a little bit about this, you really need to do a comparison of what you proposed to the government and what that contract states. And I'm not going to deep dive into that too much outside of just saying that the proposal and sometimes the contract that's awarded do not exactly marry up, especially when it comes to contract delivery dates and other requirements that you may or may not have seen on the proposal side. So really do a thorough review of that contract before you sign it, because once you sign it and return it to the government, that's what the government's going to hold you accountable for, and that's what potentially could get you into trouble in this post-award state, this execution state of the government contract is how we call it. I'm not going to deep dive any more than that. Just wanted to kind of state that on the front end as we go through the agenda. So Heather, I'll turn it back over to you for the agenda.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
thanks.
My turn.
So we did the introductions. We're going to be going through the presentation, rules and regulations, contractor systems, award and performance, contract modifications, DCMA administrative involvement, closeouts, and then at the end we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer. And again, like I said, please put your questions in the chat, and if we don't get to everyone, you can reach out to me after this and we can try to answer your questions. That's no problem. At this time, I guess we can move on to the next slide, and Renee, I'll hand it over to you.
Mute. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. So, so you have the contract now, and there may be some FAR or DFARs that you're not familiar with. So I just wanted to point out these two links here. But the other thing I wanted to point out is a great resource is NCMA. They have different certifications, which I am very familiar with, that I went out for my CFCM. Also on the website, there's a lot of webinars that you can do. And also the other item that I really have benefited from is their collaboration group. If there's any, because sometimes you read these FARs and they can be a little confusing. You can always post your question or just put it in there, and somebody else has maybe already asked that question. So I highly recommend that for a resource. So I think that's it for that.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about systems and also reiterate what Renee was saying, the acquisition.gov. If you just type in the FAR that you see in your contract with the exact numbering, it'll take you right to the acquisition.gov website and state it exactly how it's written. That may be a little TMI and hard to interpret. So I like the idea of the collaboration and asking other professionals. And then just so you know, FAR and DFARs, D stands for the defense, right? So it typically only applies to defense contracts, Department of Defense contracts. FAR applies to a bigger scope of all government contracts. but they're pretty similar, right? FAR Part 46 and quality assurance is quality assurance, and DFARS 246 is also quality assurance. So specifically in the quality assurance area, it's important to note that the contractor is responsible for the quality control, while the government is responsible for quality assurance. So these FAR and DFARS parts talk about the policies and procedures to ensure that supplies and services acquired under a government contract conform to the quality standards and requirements. So on the contractor side, the contractor is responsible for controlling the quality of the supplies and services they're providing to the government. And you can only tender your those supplies or services that conform to the requirements of the contract. As Bill mentioned in the beginning, you really have to make sure that what you're presenting and providing to the government matches the proposal and the later contract that's received. You have to also ensure that anyone that provides materials to you and is it, a sub to you if you're the prime, they're also conforming to the quality requirements. The contractor may also be required to provide an inspection system that's acceptable to the government, and it could relate to manufacturing process, to drawing specifications, testing. I'm looking at this is from the FAR, the list of items that might be required in a specific contract, the reliability and maintainability of the product, the fabrication of the product, even the technical documentation. So, and then the government will come in and they have a policy for testing and making sure that all of these quality control requirements have been met. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Bill, from the government side?
So quality assurances can be a thorn, I think, from at least in the defense industry, but I would say any executive agency that you do contracting with, this quality piece can become very confusing and difficult to navigate. Biggest thing, as Andrea said, it's tied to the type of contract. So if you're in a firm fixed price contract or cost reimbursement or labor hour or time and material under a type of service type agreement that you have with the government, just make sure that you understand what's in there. There are things like critical safety items. There are government mandatory inspection points, GMIPs, that what we call, and other things. So you need to fully understand the rules surrounding those particular things as they come to your as they are representing your particular product out there in manufacturing. So
I think too, Renee had Renee's company has a pretty intense quality or contract acceptance procedure, right? That you go through for quality control.
Right. So we're in the defense industry, so we have to meet AS 9100 Rev D for aerospace defense, which is a very, rigid plan, which for good reason, right? So it starts from the beginning of the contract to the end. And we are also audited by a second party.
And then you told me a story about your acceptance process, right? Is it COR that you?
Yes, we also have, which I was going to talk about, is a customer order review process, which basically, when the order comes in, we have each entity or department sign that they've read the contract. So basically, I'll start here. So you've won the contract, you've already quoted it. So my job, for example, would be to go through the quote, make sure that everything that we quoted and what we received on the purchase order or contract, is in sync. Then I give it my signature and sign off, and then I send it to the different departments or heads here at Rantac. So it would go to the quality, to purchasing, to test, to finance, and I need to make sure that everyone agrees, yes, this is what we quoted, we can meet all the regulatory requirements, we can meet this delivery, etc. And then after that happens, then I sign and acknowledge to the customer. And if there's any area or questions that maybe, we were surprised when we got the purchase order, I make sure that that is squared away before I sign.
Because little surprises there could cause big problems later, right?
Right. And also make sure that throughout the whole process, we're communicating. Things happen. Maybe, we can't get some material or whatever the case may be. We just need to make sure that we're always communicating with that customer so they know what to expect. And also, it's just very important. And I think that we have those relationships with our current customers. And it just helps to have that open conversation so that they're aware of exactly what's going on with their order.
And how often is it that once you get a contract, you have to ask for changes before it's even signed? Is it pretty rare, or is it common that they've put something in there that wasn't expected or is unclear?
Sometimes I find things, for whatever reason, they may agree. Somehow it just ended up in the contract. And usually what I do is I'll make a note. Basically, our acceptance is based on the fact that these items are going to be changed. So that I'm not accepting, let's say they had the wrong delivery date or whatever the case may be. So I will make sure that they understand that my acceptance is based on the fact that these items will be changed.
And then that's
And
when
then I follow up.
that's when modifications to the contract come in, because you're signing it under the assumption it will be modified.
Right.
So I think that actually is our next slide about modifications. So Bill is going to walk us through FAR Part 43, which is where one or the other of the parties to the contract would like to change something. And you're on mute. Oh, there you are. Okay.
So modifications, the bullet there that Renee was so gracious not to emphasize too much was that a lot of contracts by the government are not perfect. I represent the government side, and we always say that we're one modification away from a perfect contract, and that's what I'm going to talk about here a little bit, because frankly, we have changing conditions all the time. We don't award our contracts on time for whatever reason. We have changes in fiscal authority where money changes, and we have to modify or descope contracts or not exercise options or do things. We have to have mechanisms in place to be able to change the contract as we perform the contract. Two types of modifications. We classify them as unilateral or bilateral. Sometimes bilateral modifications will be referred to as supplemental agreements. But for the most part, within these unilateral and let me just focus on unilateral. As you can see there, administrative modifications are generally going to be unilateral mods. We will do change orders. The government, in its sovereignty, has the right to change quantities, change just about anything. And we sometimes have to exercise that right based on our ability to put things on contract quickly. If we ever do a change order to a contract, industry will have the opportunity to assess, even though we're exercising our unilateral right to change the contract. Doesn't mean that it won't result in a bilateral modification later, based on the need to negotiate an equitable adjustment to whatever that change order represented. We have this thing called the changes clause that are generally going to be we can do unilateral changes in accordance with clauses that we put in the contract. Some common ones are property clauses, options, suspension of work, and the last unilateral mod is a termination mod. And that's where the government no longer has a need, or something has changed. Again, termination modifications, I want to be crystal clear. Only the government has the right to terminate unilaterally. Generally, business to business. And generally, business to business will not have that sovereign right to terminate a contract. So, just because the government can, please be sure that you write in the proper terms in your business to business prime to sub contracts to cover that. On the bilateral side, it's negotiated agreements, equitable adjustments, as I mentioned earlier, that result out of change orders. Sometimes we'll use bilateral contracts to definitize an undefinitized contract action, what we call UCAs in the government, and then sometimes it's just the catch-all other agreements of the parties, and that's where we just maybe we don't have a term in the contract, but we need to change the contract because something has changed in scope, or we've traded off delivery dates for an extended delivery date for some other sort of type of consideration. But that obviously that's the biggest piece of our bilaterals. And there's a couple other bullets there that talk about the consideration piece, which can come in monetary or accelerated or delays in schedules, as well as engineering change proposals, which often result in variances in technical scopes and such things like that. So I know I just rattled through a bunch of stuff, but these are the main points of unilateral, bilateral modifications, and just the emphasis on the fact that there's a high likelihood that the contract that you get on day one will not be the contract you close out at the end of performance.
So if the government has this, what would you call it, a sovereign right to terminate a contract and unilaterally make decisions like that, so what, from the contractor's side, what is their response to that? Or is there anything, so what if they've incurred costs, or they have hired people and have systems set up to answer the contract, and now the contract was unilaterally terminated?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrea, because terminations can kind of get make contractors very nervous, make suppliers, make small businesses very nervous.
Right.
If the government were to terminate a contract for convenience, meaning that you've done everything that you were supposed to do in accordance with the contract, but the government just decides they just don't need that product anymore, or we have to retrieve money for something else that's happening in the world, we will. It's like an insurance policy. We will pay for costs and pay for expenses, long lead materials that you've procured, settling your subcontracts, making sure that your employees are taken care of. So
Okay.
those types of things will be part of the termination settlement. And like I said, it's like an insurance policy. We want to bring you back to the position as if you'd never received the contract in the first place. So any expenses would be tied to that termination for convenience.
Yeah, that's good to know. Because you're not just saying, well, sorry, we changed our mind.
Yeah.
You guys, see you later. Okay. I think this was, Bill, you were going to also talk about from the government side, the involvement from administration.
Yeah, so government oversight, I'm part of an organization called Defense Contract Management Agency, and we do contract administration, which is essentially government oversight. So we performed many different kinds of oversight. A lot of those where it involves direct interaction between your companies and the government are in our quality management systems. where we have, as we discussed earlier, our quality assurance representatives or specialists will come out to the factories and do quality checks on certain mandatory inspections, test results. They'll monitor testing that to make sure it's in accordance with the government contracts and specs. So quality management is a big part of our administration function. But we also maintain oversight of all the delivery schedules through what we call our manufacturing specialists. Those are the folks that are monitoring all of the contract line items in your contract with specific due dates and making sure that the government is getting the things that we contracted for on time and of quality. In firm fixed price environments, we really don't worry about what it costs to get that product to us, as long as the quality and timeliness is there. But you guys should be concerned about that, because you need to perform, as one of my former bosses said in industry, price should always be greater than cost. But sometimes that doesn't happen, and that can really set small businesses especially back. So let's see. We will. The government will perform audits. We've got Defense Contract Audit Agency, DCAA. Sometimes there'll be independent audit agencies that come in and will look at your accounting systems, estimating systems. If you have a lot of cost reimbursement contracting, there's other systems associated with that. Contract business systems. If you receive property, there'll be property system audits and making sure that you're maintaining and protecting government property as it is under your control as a supplier. And then the other things there at the bottom, we kind of talked about, didn't discuss, but we have earned value management oversight, and then what we call the contract purchasing system review, CPSRs, where we come in and see that you're adhering to government standards for how you put your suppliers and subcontractors on contracts. So that's part of the purchasing system audit that we do.
Okay. So this is, I think, Bill, you were going to talk a little bit about progress payments and what that means. And I was going to ask you about cost versus fixed price, cost reimbursement versus fixed price. Did you say the government is getting away more from the cost type contracts and trying to be more on the firm fixed price side?
Yeah. So it's all about a risk posture, and you guys probably all know this already, but the government always wants to put more risk on the industry than they assume. We're pretty risk adverse. So firm fixed price does that for us, and that's why we have a tendency to default to firm fixed price contracts. But it kind of ebbs and flows with the attitude of the government, because we find ourselves over the last probably decade getting in a lot of trouble on firm fixed price development type contracts, where we're asking industry to develop a product with a lot of unknowns, and that really falls outside of what a firm fixed price contract should look like. If you're having to do things with a lot of unknowns, and you've discovered in those unknowns that you've signed up for something that isn't technically possible, the government generally will say, well, you signed the contract, you need to go fix this, even if it's at your own personal cost. And that's really, in some ways, doesn't feel fair to industry. But on the flip side, if those unknowns are considerably cheaper, then that becomes a windfall profit for the company, and the government will always say, well, that's not fair either. So we kind of toss back and forth, and that's where we go down the path of cost reimbursement contracts, where we have full visibility in what you're spending, and we can address the unknowns in technology development or anything other kind of development. So that's important. On this sheet, to your point, we do have we have a lot of different things. We talked to that third bullet there a lot, but there are data requirements besides delivering hardware. Sometimes there's software that the government may require you to deliver. There might be reporting, especially in cost reimbursement contracts. We're going to want you to format your cost reports that show the accounting systems that Andrea will talk about, and then there are these requests for variance, what we call RFVs, or engineering change proposals that we talked about earlier. Sometimes there are materials. Right now, we have a lot of contractors here in Southern California who can't get materials because they originate all in Ukraine, and we've got a lot of factories in Ukraine that aren't delivering certain materials. So we have to go out and we have to request variance from military specs or government specs to make products, test products, and see what kind of substitution that we can do, and that will be a request for variance. And if we decide that that's probably the better way to go, then we'll do an engineering change proposal originated under your contract. We'll pay you to do that, and then the government can incorporate new specs going forward for any future solicitations and contracts.
So on the cost accounting standards, I mean, to Bill's point of, if it's a fixed price contract, meaning the contractor is taking the risk on that. They're selling the government something at a firm fixed price, and if the contractor is then responsible for making sure they make a profit on that, the price has to exceed the cost. It doesn't mean that you don't have to track the cost of the contract, because if it's a firm fixed price contract, there are options for the government to help finance the contract. It's there's something called progress payments, which the premise is that if you're building something that's going to take several months, or even in some cases years to deliver, you have to buy materials, you have to hire people. The government is recognizing that you may not be able to finance that. So we have this opportunity to ask for progress payments on a contract, but that's a cost reimbursement type of payment. So you have to show that you capture your costs in the way that the cost accounting standards require, and be prepared that for audits, especially new contractors, they have the first time they submit a progress payment, there may be an invoice review, or they may come and look at the system at the beginning. It might be part of a pre-award audit on a contractor. So the basic premise of the cost accounting standards is that each contractor uses the same method for tracking the costs in a contract, and the other overhead costs and G&A and general and administrative costs. We've talked about this before. We could probably spend a whole day on talking about how to build an accounting system. We're going to go into a deeper dive on that in our next webinar in January. But basically, the basics of it are, your system has to allocate all of the direct cost to a contract. So you have to have a system that's able to take your direct costs, materials, labor, and anything you're buying directly for the contract, and associate it with the specific contract. Then on top of that, you need to be able to allocate the indirect costs. So if you think of a manufacturing company, you're building a piece of equipment, you have the direct costs are the materials and the labor to put it together, but the indirect costs are the employee burden. So there's maybe payroll taxes, there's health insurance, there's the lights in the warehouse. All of those costs also have to be allocated to the contract. So there are ways to do that, and like I said, we're not going to get into that today, but your system has to meet these cost accounting requirements. Did I miss anything on this with the, there are some exemptions, but like I said, even if you're in a fixed price contract, and it's good for your own, your own knowledge and how to price and how to propose on government contracts to know what your all-in price is on the services or equipment that you provide.
Hey, Andrea, can I just add, a lot of you are small businesses who are on this this call today. And it's come up in a lot of the webinars that we've held that cash flow, and it just doesn't apply to small businesses, it's large businesses too. Cash flow is critically important. If you're going into a contract situation and it's going to be several $1 million and you're a small business and you know that you're going to have to turn on suppliers and probably buy materials up front so that you can manufacture a certain product, don't hesitate to request from the government progress payments because this is one area that the government is in the business of doing, and that's making sure that you guys are healthy and able to perform your contracts. There's a process there, and there is some cash requirements, as Andrea just mentioned. But don't go out there and try to get expensive, loans. I mean, we want you to get loans if that's the best way to do it, but the government can also front, not advance pay, but we can reimburse you in short amounts of time so that you're not sitting on large capital expenditures or completely unliquidate your funds so that it puts you in jeopardy of performing the contract.
Okay, I think we are moving on to closing contracts and what that means when you're done with a contract. Heather was going to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah,
how to get paid, I guess. How to get paid, right?
I mean, yeah, before the final, you do want to get paid if you have progress payments, depending on what kind of contract you have. You may be invoicing biweekly, monthly, according to the progress payments that are agreed on in the contract. So, I mean, all that's happening, of course, before it's closed out. My experience is with the federal government and with the Navy and the Air Force primarily. And in order to submit those invoices, or what they call vouchers, there is a system that they use online. It's called PIE, is what I call it, PIEE. It's the Procurement Integrated Enterprise Environment. And within there, you're going to set up your company. You're going to already have a cage code for your company. And within there, there's a system called WAF, and wide area workflow. And in there, you'll set up an administrator. Once that administrator is set up, then you can also set up other users. And within your contract, it's going to give you instructions on what you need to do and how you need to submit it, what codes you need, who to email after you submit it. Everything's in there. And if you ever have questions on how to do that, WAF has an excellent help desk. You can call them, get a hold of someone that will walk you through the process and help you. So they are user friendly. So you will submit those vouchers in WAF throughout, the contract. And then at the end of the contract, there are certain requirements on how to close it out. So again, my experience is with firm fixed price or with the cost plus fixed fee. Firm fixed price is a little bit easier, and because generally you've got those fixed prices, all throughout the contract. But with the cost plus fixed fee, that can get a little bit more complicated. You definitely want to have a good accounting system set up in this case, because it will come down to the penny. And if you're off a penny, they will reject it. So you have to be sure that your accounting system accounts for everything. You know where you were at the end of the contract in order to close it out, because within the contracts there can be different sections called CLINs, SLINs, ACRINs. It can be divided out all sorts of different ways. And say you have CLIN 1, 2, and 3, you're going to have to track it by each of those CLINs. So at the end, when you submit your final voucher, you can account for all the money that was spent on each CLIN and report that on your final voucher, because they are going to review it, and if there's anything wrong with it, they will reject it, but they will work with you and help you get to where you need to be to get that final voucher accepted. And within the WAF system, you can always see where your vouchers are at, where your final voucher's at. It gives you if it's been accepted, if it's been rejected, if it's processing, so you can see where all of your invoices are at until they're accepted, and then it'll even say paid on there. And they're usually pretty quick about turning around payments when they're accepted. So I think that's it for me. I know Renee wanted to also contribute to this slide. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I just wanted to share a little experience that we unfortunately had. We had delivery orders under an agreement with the Air Force, and for each delivery order, when it's complete, on the last receiving report, you must note a Z, which then when you put it into WAF, you do that as well. And so since that wasn't done, the payment was delayed. So it's just important that you just remember some of these little finer details, which for some reason that seemed to be hard for us. But we did get it squared away. Like Heather said, their WAF has a help desk that you can call, and they kind of walk you through everything that you need to know. So that was just it.
I think, Heather, there's a Q&A. Do you see the Q&A? Not in chat, but there's a Q&A section. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and yes, one of the questions was about, will we be getting a copy of the slides? So we are going to send around the slides along with the CPE certificates and the recording of the webinar as well.
So in the Q&A, there was one. It says, if you could reiterate, what happens to the cost incurred by the contractor in case government unilaterally terminates or changes a contract? I think Bill had
talked about that. Yeah.
Can you? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What happens to the cost incurred by the contractor in case the government unilaterally terminates or changes a contract?
Okay. Yeah, we touched on that just briefly, but if the government does choose to terminate for convenience a contract, we kind of handle it like an insurance policy. So any costs incurred by industry, that would be deemed legitimate costs. Now, there's generally going to be a termination contracting officer that's going to come in and say, are these really costs that you would have reasonably been needed to expend, or are you trying to get costs for other things in your business that go beyond the scope of the contract? So the government will reimburse anything associated with the contract effort that you signed up to that the government's terminating. But if there are other costs associated with that, those may or may not necessarily be reimbursed. So
again, the need for the cost accounting standards, right?
Yeah.
So you can prove the costs that are related to the specific contract.
Well, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. I think there's one other one about a firm fixed price contract. Is it possible to get performance-based payments for long lead material and critical material? The answer is yes, right, Bill? You can do performance-based advance payments or the cost reimbursement type.
Performance-based payments are an excellent way for you to identify long lead materials, receiving materials. Generally, performance-based payments, though, will be there'll be a verification process where the government verifies that you've received the materials that we're going to pay for. but we'll set that up as a milestone payment. You'll provide an invoice and what you've paid for the materials, and the government will reimburse that. So it is a really good way for you to get those things that you need to put into a work in process to manufacture whatever product that you have. And it's actually performance-based payments are a higher desire of the government than progress payments. So if you can tailor your manufacturing and materials into that, the government would prefer it.
So all of the we do want to talk about NCMA a little bit more, because as both Heather and Renee have alluded to, that NCMA has a lot of opportunities for certifications, for membership benefits, for training, for collaboration with other members, and we all met in NCMA, and I think it's just a great opportunity that we have 360 degrees here. We have a contractor on the contractor, we have the accounting support, and we have the government side, and to be able to sit across from Bill, and we have many times and talked about issues that are coming up with some of our clients, and he really does help us, and the idea is that he wants to help the small businesses and help the supply chain providers with working with the government, and that helps make his job better, and it certainly helps our clients and Renee's company, I'm sure, as well. So to have the NCMA membership, it's really been a great add to our resources. And then Renee, were you going to talk something about NCMA that I missed?
We were going to bring up that for our chapter, that people are able to join virtually if they're interested.
Right, because we have people from all over the country here, which is great. But yeah, if you want to be a member of NCMA San Fernando Valley, which is just outside of Los Angeles, California, we'd love to have you. And we have many of our meetings are virtual since COVID, but we also are having an in-person event. If you're local, we're going to be meeting in person next week. So let us know if you want to join us and you're local. This will all come to you in the slides, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time. But when we first started the roundtable, I called it, we envisioned that it would be a group of people getting together in a room and just sharing ideas, sharing questions, picking each other's brains, brainstorming, whatever you call it. And then, we're so excited that we get a lot of participation in the webinars, but and we did create some smaller pods for people who wanted to do a deeper dive into some of the subjects we talked about. But we do have some time remaining if there are additional questions, and if you want to unmute yourself and ask one of the experts on the panel, please feel free, or put it in the chat or the Q&A. We're here to help you. But if not, then you'll get 10 minutes back in your day. Any other questions or comments or concerns?
Even questions that aren't necessarily germane to today's discussion. If you have a challenge you want to share in your particular dealings with the government, feel free to share that too.
Okay.
We just had one pop up.
Oh, okay, good.
So I had a question for Bill.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to check in and see when he thought that the new contractor purchasing system manual was going to be released by DCMA.
I don't have a answer for you on the spot, but I would be happy to go see, and I will come back to the group with an answer, if that would be okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. I've just been hearing it was going to be released last year, and maybe this September, but I haven't seen it yet. So.
Okay, I'll find out, and I will let you know. I'll shoot a note back through this through this chat channel.
Oh, sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, and then there was one more in the Q&A section here.
And then we have a hand raised with Dr. Gavin also.
I think she was the one that just went.
Oh, okay.
After an award, are there standard operation procedures that apply to all issuing agencies, or could it differ from agency to agency?
That's a good question.
And I'm sorry, you were faint, Heather, so can you repeat one more time?
Oh, sure, sorry. After an award, are there standard operation procedures that apply to all issuing agencies, or could it differ from agency to agency?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, my sweet spot has been with the Department of Defense, but I've also supported NASA and the Department of Energy and some others. So there are nuances that are going to be a little bit different, quality nuances. If you're working in nuclear power plants or anything associated with that, you're going to have a little bit different quality standard than maybe if you're, making something more of a commercial nature. But the context of those nuances are generally going to be the same. The DoD military products generally have higher quality standards than something else. There's going to, if it's U.S. aid and you're dealing with perishable products or products that are ingested into the human body, it's going to be a little bit different following USDA or FDA requirements. So there'll be those kinds of nuances in there, but generally the same thing, the general things that we talked about today with modifications and quality requirements, those are all federal acquisition regulated requirements, and the FAR will always trump any agency system. So generally you're gonna have the same or similar requirements on all government contracts.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We have one more question that I think we can take. We have a little bit of time. When winning a BPO, is it okay to reach out to the CO? She received an award in August, but hasn't received any responses back since signing the contract.
The answer is yes. Definitely reach out to your contracting officer for the government. If you haven't received any orders or even, I don't know if that's a multiple award instrument, but if you're competing at the task order or delivery order level and you haven't received anything, find out what's going on, why the delays are. Let them know that you're ready to perform. Generally, the government is not a great communicator. And a lot of you are saying, no kidding, Bill, right? Because we do a bad time communicating. You guys reaching out to us is absolutely always welcome. So yeah, definitely reach out to your contracting officer.
Yeah, often, right? And early and often, right?
And if they don't respond, reach out to them again.
Hamid was asking about how, what is the way to get started. So Hamid, we did one of our first presentations was about how to get started. So I'm gonna Heather, if you wouldn't mind taking a note on that to send Hamid the slides and the recording from our first webinar, because that might be a good place. And then if you have questions after that, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to walk you through any of the nuances that don't make sense when you get the slides. All right, so I think we're just about out of time. Heather said the same thing in the chat that I said. We have our next webinar set for January. We figured the holiday time, it's going to be hard to get things scheduled. So on January 23rd, we're going to have a guest presenter from the Apex Accelerators program, which we're pretty excited about. And we'll talk more about that and what it is, and send out some information. And then we are going to go through an overview of accounting system. So not to put you all to sleep, but talk a little bit more in depth about how you need to set up your accounting system. It doesn't have to be a very elaborate system, by the way. So we've helped businesses of all sizes create their DCAA compliant accounting system. So I don't want people to be scared about that idea or have it be something that preclude or stops you from going into the government contracting. And then, like we mentioned, we're having the in-person event in Woodland Hills. Okay, and Heather, were you going to say anything else? Sorry, I just start talking.
That's okay, no problem.
You can just say be quiet.
I think we talked about our next webinar. We talked about our in-person event, joining NCMA, and we mentioned at the beginning we'll be sending out the email that will include the recording of today's webinar, the slide deck, the certification if you want a CPE certificate. So I think that is it, unless anybody else has anything to add. No? Okay, great.
We appreciate all of you for coming and joining us, and for Bill and Renee being here to help present, and Heather, of course, for putting together everything for us.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thanks for everyone for joining, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you.